Hey guys, Troy here with another pen video. I wanted to talk to you about a fairly new addition to the pen world. This is something that you may have already seen online that others may have shared, but it's a WingSung. WingSung is a Chinese brand. There are actually two different companies that have gone by the name WingSung, to my understanding. This is one of the latest, though. It's a WingSung 3013. You can see right there. 3013 on the band, and you've got Chinese lettering on the front of that cap band, and at the top there's no particular logo there. It's just a kind of a silver faceted dome. But this particular pen is something a little bit new in that it's a vacuum filler, and I've got several WingSungs here in my collection. Some of them have been fairly decent, some not so much, but mostly I've gotten WingSungs in clear demonstrators. Now I've got one that's all black, but by and large, most of my WingSungs have a high ink capacity and tend to be demonstrators. And this particular one is no exception. I enjoy a good demonstrator fountain pen. Now, one of the things that you're going to find about Chinese brands, they often will imitate, if not downright copy, other brands that are out there. For instance, you may find that some Jinhaos are actually copies of a Sailor, or you may have a Mont Blanc knockoff, and the looks are not exactly identical, but so close you know from whence it's copied. This particular pen here is no exception. This is essentially a knockoff of a TWSBI VAC 700. TWSBI is another Oriental manufactured brand, but it's not a Chinese brand. But this is a TWSBI 700R. It's also a vacuum filler. It's got a very similar style clip, similar style cap band, similar style knob at the end. There is a little bit of difference in size as far as the girth and the length, but the filling mechanism is essentially the same. You have a plunger on a stick, and what happens is you pull it back and then you press down, and that creates vacuum here because you're shoving out all the air, and then it flares out at the end. So it actually creates a vacuum, and that sucks in ink up into that chamber. So let me show you on the TWSBI. So this is what the TWSBI looks like. You unscrew, that lets loose of that piston, and what you would do is do this when it's in a bottle of ink, and this would fill with ink. Alright, so I've got this one flushed out now. I'd run it dry and went ahead and cleaned it out. So the 3013 by WingSung, pull it off. That's what the nib looks like with a metal, at least colored section. Get that plunger, the same kind of idea here at the end. You unscrew, you pull out, and then you plunge that down while this is in ink. It reaches that wider point, creates suction, and ink gets sucked up inside. Then you would simply tighten that down and go to write. So I can tell you this is a lot heavier. The TWSBI is a good hefty pen. This is a lot lighter. It is more slender. You can feel that when you pick it up. It's a decent length to hold here in the hand. Now, one of the things that took me a while to get this particular pen is, number one, they run for about $11, and that shipped to my door from China. I looked and looked, and unfortunately, most of these being sold are going to be at a fine or extra fine nib. I actually poked around until I found one that was going to be a medium nib, because that's what I wanted. A lot of these Chinese pens from WingSung and Jinhao, I'm finding, come fine or extra fine nibs. Why? I don't know. So I kept waiting until I would find one in a nib that I wanted, if at all possible. I did the same thing for the Moonman M2. I waited until I could find it in a medium nib and also a 1.1 stub because they came with a spare nib. But usually they were fine and extra fine. So, I kept poking around until I actually found where I could get this in a medium nib. And indeed, it does have a medium steel nib on it. I'll try to get a better picture of that as well. The feed on this is clear, which you find every so often with Chinese manufactured pens, which is kind of neat. I don't mind that clear feed whatsoever. So, does it post? Not really well. That's one of the things that I found out. The same thing with the TWSBI. It does not really post well at all. But that doesn't bother me because it is, fortunately, a decent length like this. So, how does she perform? Well, we'll find out here in a minute. I'll give you all the statistics about this particular pen, its length, its width. I'll ink this thing up off camera, and we will, well, actually, why don't I go ahead and ink it on camera? That way you can actually see how a vacuum filler would fill. We'll do that after I show you some statistics about this particular pen. Fill up this pen, I chose Lamy Pacific Blue, which has since been renamed Lamy Turquoise. I'm running a little low on this particular ink, so I'm hoping that with that little dip in the inkwell way down below that I'll be able to get this thing filled. So I'll put it in my tray. I always use a tray, just an old Chinese food container, and take the lid off from it. Let's go ahead and unscrew this, pull it out where you can see that right there, dip her on in, and plunge. Did you see that? That's how much ink just came in. So let's try it one more time. And that time I got a little more, not a whole lot more. So you're not going to get a full barrel worth when you do that. Let's try it one more time just to see what happens. Pull it up. You can see that what it does there. It's not a great angle because I've only got one camera shot here. Let's go down again. And yeah, we got roughly the same amount of ink. So you're really not going to get any more than that in there. So let's go ahead and tighten down the barrel. So it doesn't fill as much as the TWSBI does when you go ahead and do the same thing with a 700R on the TWSBI. So let's go ahead and cap it. And let's see if I can get ink to slosh around a little bit. Yeah, it's not going anywhere really. Alright, set it down. One of the things when this particular pen arrived, it had absolutely no instructions whatsoever. It was just the pen, and it was wrapped in what seemed like a mile of bubble wrap. They certainly didn't want that pen to get damaged in transit at all. So let me go ahead and set this aside, and let's whip out my trusty Rhodia dot pad. Now, let's see if we can get this thing to write and see how well she does. You're going to see it for the first time just like I am. You can see there is a little bit of ink in that feed from that fill. But this is a WingSung. See? Nothing. Right there. Nothing. So, let's see what would help. Reseat this. There, ink sloshing around a little better, but let's see if we can get it to write. shake some ink out, but will it write? Nothing. Nothing. So that's a little disappointing. One of the things I'm used to the TWSBI doing is ink sloshing. I've got absolutely nothing. Nothing. Ink sloshing a little bit when you shake it. Still nothing. Nothing. Shake it. Yep, I can get some ink out that way. Shake, shake. Let's see if we can get some ink to actually flow. Nothing. That feed is showing that there's some ink in that feed. And making sure there's nothing on there. Nothing. Zippo. Nada. Niet. Nine. Nix. So, nothing on my WingSung 3013. So I'll play with this some more. I'll see if I can actually get it to write, and if I do, I'll show you guys a follow-up. But as of right now, I've got no Lamy ink hitting my page at all out of the nib of a WingSung 3013. Just a real quick update, several days after the last recording. On this WingSung 3013, because it wasn't writing, what I had done was I went ahead and tore it apart. So I ripped out the nib, I ripped out the section, gave it a real good cleaning, a real good flushing, since those are the only parts I was really worried about. The plunger and the stem all seemed to be working just fine. I didn't see any reason to remove any of that from the pen itself. But you can see there is actually some ink in the feed. It being a clear feed, that's one good thing I like about clear feeds. I went and refilled it. Now you can see, after doing that, the refill got a whole lot more ink in it second time around. After having ripped everything apart and put it back together, got a much better fill on the ink. Exact same ink as I had last time. Still, yeah, it doesn't post, so don't bother trying. But, you know, I'm still having problems. Look. And for a while, I can get it to write. And I shook it before, and I would start to get some writing, and it would write for a little while, and then quit. And I've actually done a good amount of scribbles on some paper, like I would get some of that right there. I'd be able to write that much, and that's about it. If I kept monkeying with it, it would write for a little bit and then quit. So it's still a problem. It's still not fixed. Still kind of disappointed in this particular pen. It comes out and it goes back in just fine. Seats nice enough for the feed and the nib. So I guess I'm going to keep fighting with this pen a little bit, see if I can get anywhere with it. Otherwise, I may just get frustrated enough where I put it up and I don't fight with it until someday I just decide, well, alright, maybe I'll play with it and see if I can challenge myself once again. But anyway, that's the latest update on this WingSung 3013. Alright, let's see if third time is a charm for this WingSung 3013. The 3013 that, if you've seen the rest of the video, I've been having problems with it. So I went ahead and I worked on it yet again. So this is my third try at it. A couple of things as I'm looking at it. I do kind of like the facets that are here on the cap. So if you like faceted stuff, and it's smooth on the barrel, and you've got some facets here at the end for the turn knob. Okay. As you can tell, I went ahead and filled it this time with a different ink. And this time I went ahead and I put in Birmingham Pen's Andy Warhol Pop Art Purple. It is one of my favorite purple inks, and I do tend to like Birmingham Pens. A couple of things that I noticed after ripping it apart. Number one, if you look, you will see now that instead of the feed being clear, it actually is now dark. That tells me that there's a lot of ink that has penetrated. What I did was, yet again, I ripped out the nib, I ripped out the feed, and because I still had some turquoise residue ink in here, I wanted to flush it out really well, so I went ahead and disassembled it. I'm not going to do that right now, but you saw how you fill them. So what I did was I had unscrewed this, pulled it out, and this lock ring right here is just a screw ring that you can unscrew, and you can literally pull out that stem, that push rod in that seal at the end. You can pull that right out of the back. And I did do that, and I cleaned it up really nicely. And before I put it back, I did put a little bit of silicone grease on that seal, as one should when you're reassembling a pen. So I did that. So let's see how she writes. All right, so this is the, look at that, see? Look at that. Doggone it. I do that. I can sprinkle, and the WingSung 3013. That hard start is the same problem that I was having before. Now, a couple of things that I found when trying to work on this thing. It's a pilot style nib, all right? So what I tried doing was I actually pulled a nib out of a Pilot Metropolitan. Now, the nibs pretty much were going to be compatible. This one here is already inked, so it's not the one that I was playing with. But I've got another Pilot Metropolitan, and I went ahead and I pulled out the nib and the feed. The feed, though it's the same length and the same breadth, at the end, this has a much smaller hole in that section where that feed sits. So even though and I didn't bother trying the nib to see if I could swap out the nibs, but I was hoping to just pull a nib and a feed out of a working pen and slap it into this pen, but that feed wouldn't fit. So I did not transplant the feed and the nib from the Pilot Metropolitan. I went ahead and put these back together. And quite honestly, I had gotten it to scribble at first. So I said, all right, let's go ahead and work on this video, and let's see if we can get a good writing sample. But you saw that hard start that I just had. Now, the first two times I had an incredibly hard start, and I would get it to write for a little while, and then it would just plain quit. But at least here I was having better success. And I'm looking here, look, I've got some ink inside that cap already. All right, so let's keep working with it. Look at that. You set it down, it's another doggone hard start. It'll sling ink wherever you want, and when it writes, it's a good wet writer. I mean, I like that. I like the fact that it's going to head and scribble and lay down a whole lot of ink, but this is ridiculous. So this is my third time playing with this thing, and my third time being disappointed. So, you know, what I planned on doing was, after the second time, I thought about just emptying out the ink back into the bottle, flushing it out, and just putting it away. Well, I figured, no, I'm not going to be defeated on this. Let's see, reverse, non-existent. So I played with a nib, and I played with a nib previously, and I may yet play with a nib some more, because I do see where I'm getting, you know, it's showing up that ink is in the feed. Whereas before, when I'd look, you'd see a little bit of a blue down here, and up here you'd see a little bit of blue, and in between would be clear, and there would just be really no ink flow. So that was a positive sign, I thought, when I saw that I was getting all kinds of purple showing up in my feed. Maybe that optimism was too optimistic. Well, though I probably should have given up by now, I haven't. I've been fighting with it, and one of the things, I looked at this particular feed. If you see that dark spot down there, I haven't been able to get that cleaned out no matter what I've done to it, so I may have to use it. I don't know, maybe an ultrasonic cleaner might help. I'm not sure, but I do see where there's some ink that I can't seem to get out, so I don't know if that's something dried up. Don't know if it came that way or not. and it just was an issue. So what I did was, just for grins, I found another WingSung that I have here at home, and the feed is identical, so it's a typical WingSung feed. And this one has yet to see ink, so you see the difference between the two there. So I'm going to try this one to see if it works. You can see the other WingSung, much cheaper model that I had laying around. You can see the nibs are pretty much identical. They're both a pilot style nib, and one has a fine and one has the medium. Alright, I put everything back together and I went ahead and filled it. Got a decent fill, not the best fill I've ever gotten out of it, but about at least halfway full off from that. And I used once again the Birmingham Pens Andy Warhol Pop Art Purple. So let's see if we get any better. Looking at it, I do see that I've got a good amount of purple there on that feed. That's a brand new feed that came out of a pen that's been unused, but it's a WingSung that was in my collection that I just have never inked up before. So let's see how this one does. With a new feed. Now, the medium nib, I'm going to tell you, it is fairly smooth. Like I shared with you probably in the first video, quite honestly, I've been recording this over the period of a week. So play with it, put it away for a few days, pull out, play with it, didn't work well, put it away for a few days, picked it up again today, this afternoon after I clocked out of work for the day, and you know, I got a medium nib. I waited until I could find a medium nib. You know, wasn't going to jump on the bandwagon just yet, and I actually waited for a while for it to show up. So what I'm going to do is, where it gave me the problem previously is when I would do that. Set it down for a little while, see what would happen. So it would give me immediately a hard start when I go to pick it up and write with it again. So I've already replaced the feed. Hopefully there won't be a nib problem. A little bit of a hard start yet again. Let's see if it gives me a hard start again this time. Just set it down for a little while, and we'll see how that goes. Alright, I set it down for a little bit. Let's see what we do. Alright, that worked okay that way. Maybe I finally got this thing beaten into submission. We'll find out. Reverse writing, no, non-existent. Don't expect any. That's how wet it writes on this medium nib. Usually the nibs are fine and extra fine when they come in, and quite honestly, the WingSung is known for that. This spare WingSung nib in an uninked pen is a fine nib. I did not put that in here. I didn't want a fine nib. If I wanted a fine nib, I could have ordered one previously, had it in my hands a whole lot quicker than I did, but I waited until I found one seller that actually offered medium nibs too. So I have not put in this WingSung fine nib to swap it out to see if that would make a difference, because quite honestly I didn't want a fine nib. I wanted the medium nib. So if I want a medium nib, I'm going to buy a medium nib. If I wanted fine, I'd have bought fine. But I don't know what it is with Chinese manufacturers. Sometimes to them, I guess the default must be fine and extra fine. For me, the default is medium. That's just a personal preference. I tend to like European mediums much better than Asian mediums anyway, but Chinese mediums often tend to be very much like European medium nibs in terms of the width and the smoothness. So far, this is doing much better. Much better now that I put that new feed in it. So, only time will tell, but the WingSung 3013, hopefully I've got one that will hold a good capacity of ink and will be reliable for me. I've got some WingSungs that have been great about it, and this so far has been a frustration. My fourth time monkeying with it. Hopefully fourth time is the charm.